I get the sense that the national, and I mean national New Zealand's news media is not giving this story the attention it deserves. It started last week when we found out that 249 families have consistently been receiving the full $75 a week Family Boost rebate for ECE costs. It was a key plank of National's tax cuts package. Finance Minister Nicola Willis, and she was quite demure when she said this. That kind of, we're going to do this and we're going to do it, all went away when she was kind of like, we're not quite sure. And it was a much calmer Nicola Willis last week when she had to admit that about half the families, which is 50,000, were getting the rebate as opposed to the 100,000 they promised. But even worse, in my opinion, than that, they were saying 21,000 families would receive $75 a week. 21,000, and it's 249. Now, I did the maths on that. That's 99.988% out. So 0.012% of what they said it would be. Now, one thing we didn't talk about last week, Barb, was the other part of this. I'm sure you've got these numbers in your head. 50 families, I think they said 3,000. I think the CTU said 3,000, actually. We'll check that. 50 families are also receiving National's full $250 a fortnight tax break. So there's only fewer than 50 families who are getting that, which all ties into this 249. Was it 3,000 families? Am I right? Were they saying 3,000 families would get that, or did they never release a number on that?
I saw the 50 families that the CTU came out with in Radio New Zealand last week. I mean, the main thing is this is a capital F for fail. This was their flagship 100%. Election policy, and they failed big time. But what's interesting, I mean, as you say, the minister looked a bit more demure.
Yeah.
Like I'd gone that night to church because the Pope had died the week before. So I joined our Catholic communities here in Wellington. And even they were talking to me about it after Mass had finished. They're like, oh, we just saw you on the news. And they were like, isn't that terrible, like what had happened? And then I had Anzac Day the next day. And the amount of people that had come up to me and were saying the same thing as well was just like, oh, they failed that tax cut thing. It's a huge failure. Like, they promised so much, and the fact that, whether it's CTU numbers that you use, that actually only 50 unique families get the full 250 tax cut, or whether it's the written parliamentary question that we got, which actually showed only 249 families received it, it's still a fail. Like you said, it's like, 1%? And so the Minister of Finance should be looking like she's got egg on her face. And we've been saying this for the last couple of quarters, because this is quarter 3 or 4 that happened, And we've been saying it both at the end of quarter 1 and at the end of quarter 2, like, you need to do something about this. And, we were basically getting the heat for it, saying, well, it's only just started. And it's like, no, we're now up to quarter 3 and it's still a failure. And the fact that only because we came out with the information saying they've failed, that Nicola Willis has actually said, oh, yeah, we probably should have a look at it. It's like, that's just wrong. If we hadn't called it out, would you have just done nothing?
Yeah, there's 2 numbers here, yeah? And I think that we don't want to conflate them. The 2 numbers are, National promised $250 a fortnight as a tax rebate. And there's purely the ECE rebate, which was up to $75 a week. So the up to $75 a week is 250 families. But the ones who are getting the full 250, which will be people getting the ECE rebate and the other tax breaks and that, is only 50 families. So what that means, and this actually comes up in the Craig conversation, but not a part that you and I are going to look at. What that means is a subset of the 249 families. So you've got 249 families who are getting the maximum ECE rebate. So there's a subset of them that'll be getting the 250 a fortnight, and that's only 50 families. I'm pretty sure when they were pushed on it during election time, I should check this, they said 3,000 families would be receiving that 250 a fortnight. But I don't have those numbers to hand, so let's focus on the ECE rebate. The ECE rebate, if you were a manager at a business and you got given this job, you've got a nationwide plan, manager of this department, and this is your objective, to get 21,000 customers engaged in this plan, and you came back at the end of 2 or 3 quarters and you'd reached 250, you would be fired so quickly. You'd be on fire. You are so fast going out the door. And I don't know who or how. I can see that they're starting to blame IRD for this, but this is so bad, 99.988% wrong, that this is a fireable offence for someone. Someone needs to take responsibility for this because it's that bad. If they're out by 10% or 20%, you'd be like, nah, we could still criticize them for them because we're biased and we hate them all. I'm just joking. But 99.988% out, that should not be survivable for whoever's responsible for it.
But whoever is responsible is Nicola Willis and Christopher Luxon, because if we've got the receipts which showed during the election on their Family Boost tax package, the actual, the paperwork that they had done, they had said 130,000 families would get Family Boost. So 130,000 families. And then obviously when they got into government, IRD did the best job they had with the information they had, and they said, well, maybe 100,000 families. But nevertheless, it still sits with them. Ultimately, this is the thing that also really annoys me, is take responsibility for it. It's your policy. It's your failure. Sure, IRD may have come up with estimates. However, your estimates was worse. It was 130,000 versus 100,000. And you're blaming officials who cannot speak for themselves. And I've worked for IRD, I've worked for revenue ministers, both blue and red, and I've been in those offices when these types of policies and discussions, for, tax packages for governments happen. And the really key thing is that if you're the minister, if I was in her shoes as the Minister of Finance, you usually have fortnightly meetings between Treasury and IRD. You'd be drilling it in every fortnightly meeting, saying, how are we going with that uptake? What are we doing? Do we need to put more resources into getting greater advertising about this? What is the difficulty that families are having with receiving this entitlement? Because this is what it is. It's an entitlement. So, if Christopher Luxon can get his entitlements easily, why can't our families?
Yep, he's entitled to his entitlements. He told us that enough times before he then cancelled it because it was too embarrassing for him. So that bodes the question, if they should have been talking about this every 2 weeks, have they? And have they just kind of hoped and prayed this wouldn't come out and wouldn't go away? What are your thoughts?
I think they just hoped and prayed that this wouldn't come out. But the thing is, that's what written parliamentary questions are for, right? And that's what the opposition, our job as the Labour Party, is for, is to hold them to account. So again, I believe, given that they've, the last couple of times that we've brought this to light, that they're like, oh, it's great that the Labour Party is trying to advertise our policy. And it's like, yes, because that's what you promised. And people should be entitled to what you promised.
Yes.
I mean, I remember during the election campaign, a room full of workers basically saying, well, we're not going to, yes, we traditionally vote for Labour, but we're not going to vote for you because we're getting a $250 tax cut. And that was rubbish. Absolutely rubbish.
It's because it's actually one step worse or one step more serious than what you're saying, because people would have voted for that. So actually, it's basically a verbal contract, in my mind, a way of thinking about it. You've made a contract with these families that they would be better off, whatever it is, whether it's school lunches, they will be cheaper and better. It was always, they will be this and better. They will be as good as, or they'll be better. We don't need that ferry, but we'll have something as good as not better. And people choose to vote. People in Dunedin would have cast their vote because, due respect, Barb, Labour came out and watered down a little bit the hospitals that were down here, and then Luxon came in and went bigger than it'll ever be, the promises that was made on first day. And then when they get in, they're like, we're actually going to cut it back further. So if I do feel quite strongly about this, if you're going to make a promise, why are you allowed to get out of that promise, politician, when if I make a promise with my business, someone can go, well, that's a verbal contract, I'm going to hold you to it. Like legally, why are they able just to go, nah, sorry, we're just changing that? I mean, that's for any politician. Look, let's be honest, every political party does it from time to time. So why? How come that's able to just be turned away from so easily?
Yeah, I mean, it's a question that's best put to them, how they can get away with it. But, our job in opposition is to highlight this constantly over and over again. They failed in quarter one, they failed in quarter two, we're now at quarter three, and it's a huge failure. But more importantly, it's bloody tough for our families. Like I'm
Yeah.
in Porirua, we are an area that one is most people are hired by the government, and then the second largest employer in our area is the construction sector. So we've had a double whammy for a lot of our families.
Yeah.
But when I spoke to the Wellington Kindergarten Association on Thursday, which is whānau Manaki, they have around 6,000 families, and they support them as much as they can with low ECE costs because they want children to go to ECE, to their kindies, because that's the best way to get a good start for kids. But so what they had said in the media stand-up is, so they estimate that around 2,500 families could apply for Family Boost. That's because they pay fees. On the first quarter, only 7% of that 2,500 families actually asked them for their invoices, because to get Family Boost, you have to pay it up front, get at the end of the quarter your invoices, and then make a claim via the IRD system. So they said only 7% in the first quarter got it or asked for invoices. The second quarter, only 6% of those families asked for those invoices. And then for the last quarter, the quarter just gone, only 5%. Wow. So for them, it's clearly for families who are time poor and the bureaucratic nightmare that this is for some families. Some families find it easy, but a lot of families who probably won't, and clearly because there's low uptake, this is really difficult for them, but yet they need that money.
And it's also going to put work on the daycare centres as well, because if you're anything like me, I've got doing my receipts. Oh shit, where does that one go? I'll go back to the daycare and ask them to print it again, because so this is these guys that want to get rid of bureaucracy and stuff, who are adding layers and layers and layers to it. The other thing, now I'm a little bit ignorant to this, Barb, so you can correct me. $75 a week versus 20 hours of free childcare. Now that means to me, that's $3.50 per hour of childcare, because 20 into, it's not even that. Oh, no, it is. 20 into 75 goes $3.50. It would seem to me, being ignorant, not being in that world, that $20 or 20 hours free childcare has more of a value to it, literal financial value, than $75 a week. Or does it all kind of come out in the wash?
Well, that's part of the problem, right, with Family Boost. There is no wash up. So if maybe at the end of quarter four and you don't know, because you've got lumpy income, maybe you're a casual family, one quarter you're over the threshold and then the next quarter you're under it, there's no way that you can at the end of the year then actually get that money back for what you are entitled to. It doesn't work like that, Family Boost. So we've been saying to the government, just fix it. Figure out the way to make it easier for families. We would have gone with, as we had during the election, that extension of 20 hours free to 2-year-olds. And what that would have meant is there's already a system up and running, already well understood by providers. They are already doing it anyway, and they're still doing it for the 3, 4, 5-year-olds. But actually, now they've got this additional Family Boost for that 2-year-old segment. So there's 2-year-olds that have Family Boost, and then if you've got a 3 or 4-year-old, that goes under ECE 20 hours free. So just, fall on your sword and basically figure out, okay, maybe extending it to 2-year-olds was the better thing to do. Let's not do Family Boost. Let's just do that. Yeah, we'll take some stick from the opposition, but actually we're here to serve New Zealanders. We promised this. We know now that there's an easier way to do it. So just do it. Just handle the stick that you get from us, because actually in the end, these are families that need every dollar.
Hey, and look, Barb, all cards on the table. People know where this podcast sits politically and stuff. But if this was you guys in Parliament and this had happened, we'd be asking exactly the same questions. And I wonder, have you ever been sitting around a cabinet table or a table where this kind of monumental issue has come up, and how did you guys handle it? Or how would you? I know it's easy from opposition to go, oh, we'd do things the right way, wouldn't we? Sometimes it might be a bit different when you're in the seat of power, so to speak. If you guys were in there, what do you think would happen? Or have you seen something like this monumental size balls up happen, and how did you handle it?
So first of all, you don't wait till it comes out in media. You know, like the fact that it came out in media that only 249 families were getting the full Family Boost entitlement, and that fewer than half were actually getting Family Boost.
Yep.
Like, you would be, as a minister, like I said, this would be something that you'd want in your weekly report, and when you have that fortnightly meeting between revenue and treasury officials, you would be pushing really hard so that it never got to the point where it had to be through your opposition and media hounding you to say whether you've actually got it right or not. So that's the first thing you do, is you deal with it straight away. You're proactive about it. The second thing that you would do as well is you'd really consider, well, you have to go back to when they first came into Parliament, because I'm pretty sure they would have got advice from officials saying probably would have been easier just to extend 20 hours free because it's already a set up system. But if you don't want to listen to that and you still want to do Family Boost, then you're going to have to handle the heat if it doesn't work. And so the fact that it hasn't either gone yet to cabinet, I don't know, because the fact is it only came out in the media last week on Thursday because of our written parliamentary questions. You'd be asking a whole lot of questions if you're in the Prime Minister's seat and if you're in those Chief of Staff seats, saying, how did this happen? Why did you not tell cabinet? And why are we only hearing about this through the media? You know, those are the questions you'll be drilling both the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Revenue over. Like, it's just not good enough. And so I don't understand in how it got to this point where you're now at Q3 and it's still a failure. Yeah.
And look, love you guys. It was fun catching up at Waitangi and stuff. But when you guys are back in power, we will be asking these same questions, just so everybody's clear who's watching from the cheap seats at the moment.